It was the day before Thanksgiving in 1971. A man walked up to the Northwest Orient Airlines counter in Portland, Oregon. He bought a one-way ticket to Seattle. He used cash and gave his name as Dan Cooper. He was in his mid-40s, wearing a dark suit, a white shirt, and a black tie. He looked like any other businessman on his way home for the holiday. He carried a black briefcase. Nobody thought anything was unusual about him. The flight, Northwest Orient Airlines. Flight 305, was scheduled for a short 30-minute trip. The plane, a Boeing 727, took off on time, heading north into the cloudy afternoon sky. Once the plane was in the air, Cooper did something that would make him a legend. He handed a note to a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. You know, many flight attendants receive notes from passengers, often with a phone number. She initially put the note in her pocket without reading it. Cooper leaned closer and said, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." This was not a joke. This was the beginning of one of the most daring and mysterious crimes in American history. The note was written in all capital letters with a felt-tip pen. It explained his demand clearly and calmly. The flight attendant, understandably alarmed, went to the cockpit to inform the pilot. The note demanded $200,000 in negotiable American currency. That's over $1.5 million in today's money. He also wanted 4 parachutes. 2 main parachutes and 2 reserve parachutes. He was very specific. He wanted the money and parachutes ready for him when the plane landed in Seattle. The airline's president, Donald Nyrop, authorized the payment. He told the crew to cooperate fully with the hijacker. The passengers on the plane had no idea what was happening. They were told the plane was circling due to a minor mechanical issue. The flight circled Puget Sound for about 2 hours. This gave the authorities on the ground time to get everything Cooper wanted. The FBI gathered the money, making sure to get older, unmarked $20 bills. They also photographed every single bill. This would help them track the money later if it ever surfaced. Meanwhile, a local skydiving school provided the parachutes. When everything was ready, the plane finally landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. The passengers were released, and the exchange was made. Cooper got his money and his parachutes. Now, a new, even stranger phase of his plan was about to begin. On the ground in Seattle, the 36 passengers and 2 flight attendants were allowed to leave the plane. They were completely unaware that they had been part of a hijacking. They just thought their flight had been delayed. D.B. Cooper, a name given to him by a media mistake that stuck, remained on board with the flight crew. He was calm and polite the entire time. The flight attendants later said he was almost gentlemanly. He even ordered a bourbon and soda and paid for his drink. He was not nervous. He seemed to be in complete control of the situation and knew exactly what he was doing. Cooper's instructions for the next part of the journey were very precise. He told the pilot to fly towards Mexico City. He specified the flight path, the altitude, and the speed. He wanted the plane to fly low, at 10,000 feet, which is much lower than a typical commercial flight. He also wanted the landing gear to remain down and the wing flaps set at 15 degrees. This would keep the plane's speed at around 200 miles per hour, slow for a jet. The pilots were confused and concerned. Flying a Boeing 727 this way was unusual and potentially dangerous, but they had no choice but to follow his orders. Before taking off again from Seattle, Cooper made sure the crew was secure in the cockpit. He was now alone in the main cabin of the massive jet. The plane took off into the dark, rainy night. It was refueled and ready for a long flight south. The crew in the cockpit could only guess what he was planning to do next. They knew he had the parachutes and the money. The low altitude and slow speed made it possible for someone to jump from the plane. His plan was becoming clearer, but it was still incredibly risky. No one had ever tried something like this before. The crew felt a change in the air pressure in the cabin shortly after 8 o'clock that evening. This told them that a door had been opened. Cooper had lowered the aft air stairs, a staircase at the very back of the Boeing 727. This was a unique feature of this type of plane. Sometime between Seattle and Reno, Nevada, over the rugged, forested wilderness of southwestern Washington, D.B. Cooper jumped. He leaped from the back of the plane into the freezing night, with a bag of money strapped to his body. He disappeared into the storm, and the legend was born. He was never seen or heard from again. The moment Cooper jumped, a massive search operation began. The FBI, along with local law enforcement and military personnel, tried to figure out where he might have landed. Two F-106 fighter jets had been scrambling to follow the plane from a distance, but they never saw anyone jump. The weather was terrible, with heavy rain, strong winds, and low clouds. The area below was a vast wilderness of mountains, forests, and rivers. Finding a single person, alive or dead, in such terrain would be like finding a needle in a haystack. It was a daunting and almost impossible task from the very beginning. The FBI conducted one of the most extensive and longest-running investigations in its history. They interviewed hundreds of people and followed thousands of leads. They checked the backgrounds of known criminals and paratroopers. They created a composite sketch of the suspect based on descriptions from the crew and passengers. The sketch was published everywhere, but it led to countless false tips. The name D.B. Cooper was actually a mistake. A reporter misheard the name of a local man, Dan Cooper, who was questioned and cleared early on. The media ran with D.B. Cooper, and the name stuck forever. For years, there was no trace of Cooper or the money. It seemed as if he had vanished into thin air. Then, in 1980, a breakthrough happened. A young boy named Brian Ingram was digging in the sand on the banks of the Columbia River near Bar, Washington. He found 3 bundles of rotting cash. The money was still held together by rubber bands. The FBI confirmed the serial numbers matched the ransom money given to Cooper. This discovery raised more questions than answers. It was found far from the primary search zone, and only about $5,800 was recovered. The rest of the $200,000 has never been found. The discovery of the money led to many new theories. Why was only a small portion of the money found? Did it wash down the river from where Cooper landed, or did he bury it there and plan to come back for it later? Some investigators believe the location of the money suggests Cooper did not survive the jump. They think he likely landed in the river or in a dangerous part of the forest and perished. The money might have been washed downstream over the years. However, without a body or the rest of the cash, it remains pure speculation. The case officially remained open for decades. The FBI officially closed the active investigation in 2016, after 45 years. They concluded that they had exhausted all credible leads. Despite investigating over 1,000 potential suspects, no one was ever definitively identified as D.B. Cooper. The theories about his fate are as wild and numerous as the trees in the forest he jumped into. One popular theory is that he was an experienced paratrooper, perhaps a military veteran. His knowledge of the plane and parachute suggests he had some training. However, experts pointed out that jumping at night, in a storm, from a commercial jet was something no sane skydiver would ever attempt. Another theory suggests that Cooper was not an expert at all and died during the jump. The conditions were terrible. He jumped into a freezing cold high-speed wind. He was wearing a business suit, not proper gear for a high-altitude jump. He may have been knocked unconscious or injured on his way out of the plane. His parachute might not have opened correctly. If he did land safely, he would have faced a brutal wilderness with no survival gear. This is the theory the FBI tends to favor. They believe he simply did not make it, and his remains are lost somewhere in the vast Pacific Northwest. Over the years, several people have been named as possible suspects. One was a man named Richard McCoy Jr., who staged a similar hijacking just a few months later. However, he was later ruled out by the FBI. Another was a man named Dwayne Weber, who reportedly confessed to his wife on his deathbed, "I'm Dan Cooper." There have been books, documentaries, and countless amateur sleuths dedicated to solving the puzzle. Each new suspect brings a flurry of excitement, but so far, none of the evidence has been conclusive enough to solve the mystery for good. The lack of a body, a parachute, or the rest of the money keeps the door open for speculation. So why are we still fascinated by D.B. Cooper today, on February 25, 2026, more than 50 years later? The story has all the elements of a perfect myth. It is a tale of a lone, anti-hero who took on the system and won. He was bold, clever, and mysterious. He committed a serious crime but did it without hurting anyone. And then, he simply vanished. In an age where everything is tracked and recorded, the idea that someone could pull off such a feat and disappear without a trace is captivating. D.B. Cooper represents a fantasy of freedom and escape, a ghost who pulled off the perfect crime and became an American folk legend.